Yeah, but that's good. That could be quite nice.
The Bitcoin blockchain. Bitcoin was the currency, called a cryptocurrency. It's a currency protected by cryptography. But really, we're talking today less about the coins that run on top of these things than the underlying architecture, the distributed ledger, which is basically what a blockchain is. And what's happened is that because Bitcoin was open source, there have been various adaptations to the Bitcoin blockchain, so that there's, first of all, there were things called meta coins, which is people adapting the functionality of a Bitcoin. And then there were things called altcoins, which is people not using the Bitcoin blockchain at all, but creating their own blockchains. Like probably the most relevant one for what we might talk about today is a different blockchain entirely called Ethereum, and they have a currency on there called Ether. So the key thing to know is that, one, this is not just a financial technology as it's sometimes understood, but there are use cases absolutely all over the place, from healthcare, insurance, land registry, the diamond trade, people using blockchains to track artworks, so all kinds of different use cases, as well as in finance. Originally, it was invented to cut banks out of the equation, so you could have peer-to-peer financial transactions. And then, as is the way with banks have now got heavily involved in this, and you have this huge consortia of like 80 banks trying to invest in blockchain technology themselves. So I guess the key starting point is this is not just a financial technology, it's starting to be used in all kinds of other verticals, including music, and that there's not just one Bitcoin blockchain, but there are various blockchains. Maybe interoperability and stuff might be, I guess, something that we touch on. In terms of music, does anyone here know some?
Maybe Marcus, it would be good if you could explain, since a lot of the audience is not familiar with it, what is exactly the concept of, or not exactly, roughly, the concept of blockchain in terms of it's a database, and what is the sort of the peculiarities and the advantages from other database management solutions?
A blockchain is just a distributed database. So most databases are centralized, so we end up with silos of data. So if you think about the music use case, a copyright use case, we have silos of music copyright data. But and most databases are centralized. There's someone who's in control of that database. What you have when you have a distributed database, and Bitcoin is a good example, is that there is no one in charge of Bitcoin. Arguably it's not quite as distributed as it should be, but as a general principle, it's shared between a large number of nodes in a peer-to-peer way. It's non-hierarchical. So it's like a mesh instead of a hub and spoke kind of model, which would be a centralized database. That's what's unusual about it. And I should have said that when people talk about a blockchain, all a blockchain is a chain of blocks. What's in those blocks in a Bitcoin blockchain is Bitcoin transactions, and each block is chained to the previous block. And what that means is that it's very hard, maybe we shouldn't say impossible, but it's very hard to change the data. So it's close to immutable because each block refers to the previous block, and so you can't alter this block without altering the block before it, and so on. So it's an extremely secure and distributed way of storing data that can be non-hierarchical.
Mm-hmm. And I would maybe add as well that on top of the security that the blockchain gives, the fact that what Marcus was mentioning about being a decentralized database adds another layer of security, because if you have a database in a lot of different points at the same time, if you wanted to change something on a particular block of blockchain, you would have to change it in all of them at the same time. Because if not, there would be a change in one that would trigger questions or alarms in the other nodes. They call nodes, but nodes, let's imagine like it's an actual computer, right? And that it's connected and shared. So if someone even managed to break on a blockchain and change one of those blocks, then there will be immediately, correct me please if I'm wrong, a discrepancy with the other ones. Would say like, hey, hold on a second, this is not right. What has happened? Why this change happened? And then it's when the mining and the sort of confirmation process joins in, right?
Some people like this analogy, some people don't, but sometimes it's called like a Google Doc, so that, you know, if you share a Google Doc between multiple people, it's updated everywhere at the same time, but without Google, so you don't have the big corporate player in there. That can be a good shorthand. If you want to get technical, you can argue with it, but it's something that's just changed everywhere at the same time. Everyone agrees on the data, but you don't have a big corporate player in there. Yeah. One last thing before we go on to music applications that we probably should say, because it might come up, and if we don't say what we mean by this phrase, it might get complicated or confusing, is that not only can you have a networked distributed database, but especially as it's still new technology, we're talking about technology that's only, as I say, kind of 10 years old, but there's been at least one subsequent generation of blockchains after Bitcoin, as I say, this Ethereum blockchain being a good example. And what you can do on Ethereum is something called smart contracts. And the joke about smart contracts is that they're not smart and they're not contracts, but basically they are programmable transactions. And so, say in a music case, you could use them for automated licensing or something like that. So not only have you got a database, but you've also got some programmed into a blockchain, some licensing terms in these things called smart contracts. I suppose that's the other kind of important bit of tech. Shall we just... So and then to go on to does that make some kind of sense, like in terms of like a some people think that you could use blockchains to make a more successful attempt at something like GRD. And why would it work when GRD failed? Well, one other concept is this idea that what you can do with a blockchain is you can issue tokens or some means of aligning incentives in a way that, so the GRD actually was, as you say, a centralized database. This would be decentralized. And distributed. So lots of people could contribute. And then what you can do, not necessarily, but one way you can use blockchains is to, and this is becoming much more popular, is to issue, to use, because on a blockchain you have multiple layers, and so we have the blockchain layer, but we have some kind of currency or token layer. You can use that to incentivize people to participate somehow. So what you could do is you could have, because let's say the GRD failed basically because people they didn't trust each other, and they weren't really all pulling in the same direction, and so at the end there was a breakdown. You can incentivize participation and good behavior, which is really the clever thing about Bitcoin in the first place, through using tokens. I'm a bit reluctant to go down a really technical discussion about how that might work, but this is the idea that you can have a stake in how it ends up working, I think is a powerful piece. It's because the clever thing about Bitcoin originally was that you could make this work without the banks. And so even when you don't trust anyone, even when you don't, all you have on Bitcoin is you have somebody's public key, which is just this long string of numbers and letters that doesn't make any sense. You can't connect that to a real person, but you still create good behavior between these people because it's the clever thing about Bitcoin is not just the cryptography, it's kind of game theory. It's like incentivizing people to behave a certain way, and some of that can be carried through these tokens, which, as I say, can get quite a complicated discussion.
Yeah,
So I'm a bit
I think that the fact of the decentralization, at least from, if Marcus was saying that he's not tech savvy or that you are not from a technological background, I have a degree in law, okay, so I'm even less, but on the technological side, but from the business perspective, music business perspective, what the huge difference is the decentralization as well of the database. Because the project that you mentioned, tens of millions of euros put into it, failed. One of the key, I think, reasons, I don't know, I might be wrong, but the failure was precisely that this database was going to be in one place and everyone had to trust and all that. If you decentralize that and you work with the blockchain permissions and system, then this disappears because everyone is sharing the same one and knows what is going on at every time. And if there's a change and they have anything to do with this that it's being changed, they will have to authorize it in one way or another. So if you are the owner of, let's say that you have the ownership of a work, of a song on a blockchain, you create the first block, everyone agrees that this song it's owned by this author, this publisher, there's this the interpreter, the artist, all that, it's there, it's agreed. Then these stakeholders, when there's a change on the blockchain, there are certain stakeholders that have to authorize that this is true. So let's say that the publisher transfers the publishing rights to a other publishing company. The original publisher will have to say, yes, I actually accept this because that's what happened, right? And that's what creates the next block, right? More or less in general terms. So I think that that's one of the huge differences between the old attempt and the new attempt. It's about new options that technology offers. Probably the CSAC centralized database, as you say it's centralized, can be a decentralized blockchain. What I mean when we say decentralized, it doesn't mean that worldwide access. Because what we mentioned about the nodes...
Yeah, access is
different.
Because what I was mentioned at the beginning, when you're saying database, it's not, the database, comprehensive database is different than database which is part of blockchain. Because
how?
I don't understand
because you mentioned small contracts.
Smart contracts, yeah.
I know that most people believe in blockchain technology, that small contracts could be very effective way to speed up the money flow between the users and right holders. And it could be, of course, but many people, even policymakers in European Parliament, they mentioned that every creator should be able to negotiate directly to the user.
Yeah, so but
it's a strange idea because Max Martin is able to negotiate contract with Spotify, but me as a small songwriter, I will be cheated like I am cheated by YouTube and other.
I think that anyone that says that, I think that doesn't understand the reason and power of collective management. Yeah. Right. So whoever said that in the commission,
some people do say
not
that. Though. You're right. Yeah. Some people do say it.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that they've.
If they say that, I believe, and with all due respect, with whoever says it, that I think that do not understand why collective rights management exists and the power of having a lot of interests united to represent a common interest. So, but going back a bit with what you were saying about smart contracts, and I think that probably a lot of the questions that are coming up, I think that maybe I will do my presentation because a lot of things will come up as well.
We should maybe just preface it by just saying that there's loads, just to finish that, and we should go straight on to this, but
Yeah.
just to say that this is, we sort of talked about the tech just very generally, as it's sort of like 10-year history. I think just before we go into just this one case, we should just say that basically in terms of how it's being used in music, and the reason why some of our answers might be a bit vague of some of what I've said is sort of deliberately a bit vague, is just because until we go into the specifics, there are different people using it in quite different ways. So for instance, there are people using it kind of, even in music, there are people using this technology in quite different ways. So that some people are using it for storing music copyright, some people are using it for trying to fight secondary ticketing and counterfeit ticketing. And even the people who are using it on the ticketing side, and likewise the people who are using it on the copyright side, are using it in quite different kinds of ways. Some people are using it to reconcile databases that don't match, say, between a publisher and a society or something like that, so that it helps to see where there are anomalies in the data, and then they can use machine learning to try and match them. Other people are using them in different ways. So it's a very new kind of technology. It's particularly new in how it's being used in music. And some people are talking, okay, great, we don't need collection societies, the kind of thing, the individualistic kind of use case you're talking about. At the same time, PRS and ASCAP are doing something with blockchains within the collection society.
So the EU directive, what it said is like, we should open the market for free competition in this particular part of the music business as well. And what it said is all the member states of the European Union have to allow this new type of companies to exist under certain rules that the European Commission set out in the directive. The directive was issued in, I think it was April 2014, and the member states had 2 years to implement and to transpose, they say, the regulation into their own legal systems. A lot of countries have not done that, others have done that, but basically the way that European directives work is that if after 2 years that the directive is issued, the member states or state members have not implemented this directive, then it's immediately enforceable in all the member states, as it is. So from April 2016, this directive became enforceable, and it could be applied in all the countries in the European Union. That's when we decided to create Unison. And when we saw the business opportunity of getting into the rights management business, we thought that we would not try to do exactly the same, just a little bit better. We thought, okay, let's think about what technology is out there in the world that can help us to solve the problems that we would face as a collection society operating in this new environment with more competition. And we did a lot of research, obviously, and we identified two big problems that we, before Unison, we had experience as being publishers, and we faced a lot of the problems that the rights holders face. We closed the publishing company in order to be able to open this new entity, because we could not be right holders to create this entity. But I say that because we knew from our own experience as well things that as publishers we didn't entirely like, or that we thought that we could maybe try to make it better. And one of those was the usage tracking. When the music is played, where the music is played, why we don't know with the technology available out there exactly what seconds our song has been played in a certain TV, in a certain radio, when it has been in YouTube, how many, all this information. And we identified that there are, like, out there in the world several providers that give this information. They've developed the technology that it's 99.9% reliable on knowing what music is played in TV, and now they even can differentiate if it's an advert or a film or it's a news, for example. So we use these data providers that they have their own technology to track, to identify what music has been played. The other big problem, and now it's when I'm going to get into blockchain, is the black boxes. All this money that the collection societies have and do not know how to distribute because they don't know who owns a particular work. And it's not, we don't believe that the collection society do it on purpose or anything like that. It's just that before now the technology was not there to always identify what a particular song was and who was the owner. Okay? So we thought, what's the best technology out there that could help us with that? And that's when we thought and did a lot of research that blockchain was probably the best technology out there to help us solve this problem. Why we thought it was the best? First, because unlike other technologies that were designed by the music industry, this technology doesn't come from the music industry, it comes from the financial industry. The financial industry is pushing really hard to make this technology work, and that makes us believe that they will get away with it. If it was just a music thing, we don't know if it would work. But as we were saying, the financial sector has invested a lot of money in this technology, and now it's being used in things like to track the ownership of land or flats or buildings. Forget about the cryptocurrencies. That's the other layer that we were saying. Blockchain is being used as a database technology that ensures the best system to date to track ownership of wherever. So we thought, okay, we have a problem with tracking ownership of music works, then we can apply what is being applied to ownership of land or ownership of cryptocurrencies, of ownership to ownership of music. And that's when we came across .blockchain media. We did a research of all the blockchain companies that were out there working in the music sector. And after doing our research, talking to many of them, we decided and thought that our best bet was to work with .blockchain media. One of the main reasons why we thought they were a very good option is that they are already working with big collection societies in different parts of the world. It's been on the news that they have a project with SOCAN. They have projects with publishing companies as well, big ones. And that was an extremely important factor to us because blockchain, from our perspective, the use of blockchain in the music sector will only be fully practical and operative if a lot of stakeholders use it. Because the beauty of blockchain is when you have a decentralized database where a lot of people share minimum viable data that we all share, so that you in Poland, me in Spain, or whoever other in Spain, and everyone knows that this work, it's owned by these people. And that if there's any change to this ownership, so a publishing company sells their rights to another publishing company at 25% and they keep 25%, all of this information, it's being recorded in the, right now, the most reliable technology there is, the blockchain technology. So that's why we chose .blockchain media. And we use them. So what we've done is we are the first PRO in the world because we are new. We have one big problem, and it's that we are new. And we have one big advantage, is that we are new. So the advantage as well is that we've been able to design our database being 100% pluggable to the blockchain environment. We are not a blockchain company. We are a collection society that uses blockchain technology for what we think is the best use that we can give. For example, you were mentioning smart contracts. we think, we might be wrong, that smart contracts are quite far away in terms of time to be really practical. We don't know if it's 5 years, 10 years, maybe something will change, and here the academia might tell us, no, there's someone researching that will release something next year. But we think now, with information that we have, that smart contracts will not work for the music industry for a lot of number of reasons.
Okay, so there's two things to say about that. One, Spotify are definitely interested in blockchains. I mean, for one thing, they acquired Media Chain last year, who are a blockchain startup looking at rights management. So Spotify are interested in, and also major publishers and also major labels. I know people are running behind, NDAs and closed doors and whatever. Let's just say major labels and publishers are definitely running proof of concepts and pilots. That doesn't mean that it's going to be adopted on a big scale tomorrow, but everyone is looking at it because you'd be crazy not to. But the other thing is that what you're saying about the kind of the blockchain model is X. There's loads of blockchain models. The blockchain model is not necessarily that you have to stop a Spotify subscription type of model at all. I mean, you could use this is like, think of it like a second layer of the internet. Some people call it the internet of agreements or the internet of value or something like that. It sits on top of the internet, and it's about agreeing information. It's about was originally trading money, but let's say it's about digital asset management, and the assets could be intellectual property, it could be copyright, or in another case could be concert tickets or whatever. And you can use it's multi-purpose. I mean, as Jordi says, people are using it in developing countries to try and have an immutable way of recording who owns what land. Or, the diamond trade example is people are using it to try and prevent diamond fraud by recording specific diamonds on a blockchain. So there is no one blockchain model. It's a general purpose technology. I mean, some people have compared it to Steam, or, as I say, to the internet. It's like, and that, in fact, the World Economic Forum, to get a sense of kind of perspective, the World Economic Forum see this as what they call the fourth industrial revolution technology, along with artificial intelligence, virtual reality, nanotechnology. It's a technology that can be applied in loads of different ways, and even within music, loads of different ways. People are using it, say, for instance, to introduce transparency into supply chains in fashion, so that you can trace your garment back to the alpaca that gave you the wool in the first place. Or people are using it in gaming, or loads of different. So it's very general. It's individual use cases are really useful because they help to
show an example,
pull it down.
One of the ways that you can use it. We as Unison, we don't go for the speculation. We don't have any Bitcoin or anything cryptocurrency related to that. We only use it for what we think that now it's tested and it's best of use for us, which is to record the ownership of the works. Because then our platform that we've created, what it does is it takes the information of the use of the works, it takes the information of the ownership of the works, and automatically, knowing the money that comes in, mix it up and shows all this information to our clients, our right holders. That's the platform that we're going to be releasing in 2 weeks' time. But Blockchain Media also what offered us that was interesting to us was the machine learning, artificial intelligence piece of technology that they have developed, which is to complete information that it's missing from metadata. So they have a very powerful tool that you put certain information, the one that you have about a song, and this machine learning technology that they've built checks around the blockchain environment about a lot of different sources of information and completes missing metadata points for one song. So that was another added value, that it has a lot to do with blockchain, and they developed the technology, both technologies at the same time. And that's why also we went to establish a partnership with them for that side of our business. And why we were doing all that? To try to accomplish our two main objectives, which is efficiency and transparency to our right holders, not transparency to all the world, but to our rights holders, and do that through technology. And that's the principle of Unison, and that's how we have taken what we thought it's the best use that we can have of the blockchain for what we need. We are using these technology advances for very practical reasons, which is to show to the right holders the information on the use of their works every 24 hours, all the information that we have. TV and radio for the markets that we operate in can be, which TV and radio it's only Spain to start with for us, but over there we can show every 24 hours where a song of the catalog that we administrate was played, what it was, and this can be also in radio. So this can be used by our clients to make business decisions as well. So if you are a publishing company and you are just invested 10,000 euros, to say a figure, in marketing for a particular songwriter or for a particular artist in one country, you can figure out how this campaign is going by having all these inputs, all this information, because record sales are not anymore as immediate and as a good guideline of how you're doing, but knowing if your song it's being played 100 times more than last week, it shows you that your marketing campaign is working, or the opposite, it might show that it's not working and you might decide to cut this particular strategy. Pay on time, we want to set up also, and we will set up a monthly payment structure. Obviously, and we explain that, all musicians and everyone, right holders know that TVs don't pay monthly, and they will not pay monthly, but you get a lot of money every month that might come from live, might come from different buckets, and we, after a certain minimum, will use this technology to be able to do more regular payments. And obviously we do all that because we have the data of monitoring.
We have to go to Q&A.
Okay, yeah, sure.
I know we could talk about this for days on end.
No. Well, yeah, let's open to the floor. I just wanted to give as a practical example as possible on how us, and that's only us, that's not like how we have used this to try to achieve a business model that it's hopefully attractive for our clients.
You can dot blockchain media, who Johnny mentioned. I mean, you can look them up. They're a good example of one of the startups that's relatively prominent in the space and working with some quite big organisations. But if you're interested, you know, there's loads of other examples of music startups who are using this tech in different kinds of ways. Some of them raising huge sums, millions. I can think of startups who've raised millions literally in 5 minutes. Do you have any questions on this then? Let's go into Q&A. We've already started having questions, so it's all a bit mixed.
No questions? We've either been very unclear or very clear, which and I probably it's the first. But
one thing that's important to say is like that like every technology, this is, well, is it that first law of technology? That technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. It's like it can be used for good or for ill, this tech. I mean, there's some really interesting stuff. We're talking about lots of the interesting ways it could be used, perhaps very positively. There is some interesting research on the more sort of dystopian side of how it can be used. It's like is the internet good or bad for music or something? You know, I mean, you can argue either way. I mean, and there's potential risks apart from the various barriers to entry. There's also potential risks in some use of blockchain for artists and rights holders' uses. Yeah. Although I think the kind of the interesting thing really is that often I've been at music conferences about this topic where the conversation's turned into a bit of will blockchain technology achieve prominence or not? And I think that that's probably the wrong conversation. I think it probably will achieve some degree of prominence because, as Jordi says, this is kind of this is technology that's applied way beyond the music industry. It's much, much bigger than us. And it's being adopted so fast elsewhere, although it's very new and it's very early days. So I think the question is kind of who is adopting it and how is it being used and who's involved in the conversation are the really key questions, rather than kind of is this going to be a thing or not.
Yeah, that's why I said as well that we are staying away of any cryptocurrency situation, because we perceive as a very dangerous ground the speculation on linking cryptocurrency to music works, and speculating with that could make a lot of money to some people but could go really wrong. And we've seen cryptocurrencies platforms that they seem to be neutral, but then after a while it is discovered that there are like certain powers behind it that control the sort of fluctuations and all these type of things. So that's why this dark side, a potential dark side related to the speculation, we are staying absolutely away from it until it is proved that it's reliable and that it's positive for the music industry.
Already, cryptocurrencies, they're called, are in a kind of legal grey area, and some people think they're currencies, some people think they're other things, like some countries are treating them as securities. There's some places they seem like speculative assets because people are buying them and hoping they go up in value and then they're trying to sell them on. So even country to country, Bitcoin is treated differently. Yeah. And even within a country, in America, you need, if you want to operate in New York, a Bitcoin business, you need to get in New York State, you need to buy something called a bit license, is it called, or something? So, and it's not bureaucratic and expensive to do that. So only a small number of people have done that. There are also what Jordi's actually alluding to when he's talking about avoiding some of the sort of speculative side, and also what I was alluding to when I said that some companies are raising millions in minutes, is that through these tokens I mentioned, or what some people call initial coin offerings, ICOs, you can set up a startup and then fund it through selling a coin, and no joke, even in the music space, people have literally raised millions in minutes. There's a company in London, a ticketing company using blockchain to fight. One of the people using blockchains to combat secondary ticketing. They raised $18.7 million in 5 or 7 minutes or something, doing one of these token sales, and they actually have an interesting business model. I think they're a kind of promising company, so I don't include them in what I'm about to say, but there are other people who are raising lots of money through these token sales without a very clear business model, even occasionally being outright scams. And the way that different countries treat ICOs or token sales is really, really different. Whole countries will suddenly ban them.
And other countries issue their own?
Other countries,
Venezuela did it for their own, for example, recently.
It's a wild west. And what's happening is that regulators are always behind tech, aren't they? That's how it works. They are catching up, but this pace of regulation is... And with the pace of innovation is so fast that the regulation is lagging behind, and people are worried about what will happen retrospectively. If I buy a certain coin and I don't, will someone come knocking on my shoulder down the line and tell me that I broke a law somewhere? So there some of the kind of Bitcoin maximalists who think this is the future, utopian kind of people, think that code is law, as some of them say, but actually kind of real law. Yeah, Jordi has a law degree, so the real law is still, I'd say, Trump's code.
We don't use blockchain for tracking. Tracking is done by other technology. We use blockchain to know who owns the work. Definitely yes, about the hairdressers. I don't know how it's in Poland. In Spain, 50% of the income of the collection society comes from TV and radio, and from the other 50%, most of the income comes from the live performances.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
the hairdressers in Spain are, at least, I don't know how it's important, but in Spain it's a little part of the market. So
We have something like 20% coming from
Okay.
restaurant hairdressers.
Yeah,
So the
restaurants-
houses
yeah,
that
that's
we're not
another,
able to-
yeah, that's, yeah, because this tracking technology, usage tracking, we are working with some systems that are very good at tracking on big commercial spaces. So this 20%, most of it comes from hotel chains, food chains. So suddenly we've identified that actually the little hairdresser that pays 60 euros a year to play music, it's very little. The background music from hotels, and for that there is a solution. For that type of clients, there is a solution because they have like, for example, Adidas. They have 6,000 stores in Europe. They are designing a system that they know exactly what sounds in every shop at every time, at every moment, so they can produce this play. So we are very, very, very close to, of these 20%, have a very good rate of tracking of usage.
You can use it to solve some problems. Geordie is actually using it alongside other technologies. Lots of other startups are also using it alongside other technologies. They're interesting work at the intersection with artificial intelligence, with the Internet of Things, with all these other technologies. And I mean, on its own, a blockchain is only good as what you put
In it.
in it.
And how many people
Yeah, and
is using it.
at the moment you probably can't put an actual piece of music on it. What you're doing technically is you're creating what's called a hash, which is like a compressed fingerprint, something a compressed unique identifier, and you put that on a blockchain. And what's valuable is that you can create a link between that hash of the metadata. So on the dot blockchain media example is minimum viable data, which I can't remember what you have, but it's like 4 things, isn't it? It's like writer, date.
Well, there are like, I
There's a
think
few
it's,
things.
there are 37 for the full commercial
Okay.
use. That includes all the information that you need for mechanicals, publishing,
Okay.
everything. But then there's the minimum viable
yes,
data,
and-
which is the ownership, the basic ownership.
And
which
then
is-
you have a link between that and the work. So that's the key thing about it. But yeah, it's only as good as what you put on it. There's something that people say about blockchains, which is garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So it's just like
That's
if you
why-
fill it with shit,
That's why
it's not going to be any good. And then the one role for collection societies, some people say, will be as guardians of what data gets put on, because do you use that some other way of having a means of aligning incentives so that they have a reputation-based way of only putting good data, because somehow or other you need a way that I don't claim that I wrote Hey Jude, and I should get all the royalties for that. There are other ways of, some blockchains are permissionless and anyone who wants to can, it's slightly technical, but some blockchains are more open and permissionless than others. So there's all kinds of different ways. And do you have them completely non-hierarchical, or do you actually have a sort of second layer of validating people? Different people are doing it in different ways.
Poi scusate, io sono